Well, new at 10, rapidly widening fallout tonight after a bombshell report by Politico shines a light on the communications behind the scenes between would-be future leaders of the GOP. And Politico's report centered around leaked chat records of multiple chapters of the Young Republicans, the youth wing of the U.S. Republican Party. The text messages range from sexism to racism to outright endorsements of Adolf Hitler. In fact, most of the messages are too graphic for us to even read on TV. And tonight, we're hearing from some of our first reactions from political leaders, including the vice president.
The reality is that kids do stupid things, especially young boys. They tell edgy, offensive jokes. Like, that's what kids do. And I really don't want us to grow up in a country where a kid telling a stupid joke, telling a very offensive stupid joke, is cause to ruin their lives. Focusing on what kids are saying in a group chat, grow up. I'm sorry. Focus on the real issues. Don't focus on what kids say in group chats.
This was so vile. It is hard to find the words to put into context that these are people who are part of a political party, one of two major political parties, and they believe in gas chambers and rape and discrimination based on the color of people's skins. These are racist, sexist, disgusting remarks. Kick them out of the party. Take away their official roles. Stop using them as campaign advisors. There needs to be consequences. This has to stop.
Well, we should point out some Republicans in Washington are calling for accountability, like GOP Congressman Mike Lawler, who posted on X calling on everybody involved in the group chat to resign from their leadership positions immediately. And at this hour, it's clear that some action is being taken. The chief of staff for New York Assemblyman Mike Riley has been fired. The Kansas State Republican Party has disbanded its entire Young Republicans group. And one member who had worked in the Kansas AG office was also fired. In Vermont, Governor Phil Scott has demanded that State Senator Samuel Douglas step down, and the condemnation is still growing tonight.
On You Tonight, the X account for the National Young Republicans has also released this statement saying the organization is appalled by the language used in this chat, calling it vile, inexcusable, and disgraceful. The statement also calls on those in the chat thread to immediately resign from their positions. Joining us here tonight in Studio C, the youth chair of the Michigan Republican Party right here at home, Krish Mathrani. And Krish, it's always good to see you. Thanks for joining us here. The obvious question is here is when you first saw this, what was your initial reaction when you saw all these terrible things written?
Look, Rube, thanks for having me on. I've dedicated my life to politics and policy, and it's certainly not the career choice my parents would have liked, but it's one that I've done because I want to serve this country. But regardless of what I've accomplished, I've never called myself a politician. I'm a public servant. And the difference between a politician and a public servant is the ability to call members of your party out when they're wrong. And, you know, we have lots of politicians in America. We don't need more. What we need is statesmen who put the country first, and that is what my statement was. It was to call out people in my party who were wrong, and there's no way to justify that.
Yeah, in your statement, you basically said, look, these messages filled with racist epithets, anti-Semitic conspiracies, references to rape, praise of Hitler, dehumanizing language are grotesque and must be denounced. When you heard our vice president basically say these are kids who are just making jokes, was that a strong enough denouncement of this?
So one of the members of the group chat is a sitting state senator. We need to hold all politicians and all public servants at a higher moral standard. You know, if you work for the United States government, if you work for elected officials, or if you're running to become an elected official, you need to be careful on what you say. You know, that's common sense to
But do you
anyone.
think do you think the vice president should have been a little more strong or a lot stronger in denouncing this as you were in your statement today?
So the vice president has made it clear that what they have said is incorrect. It should not have been said. And I'm sure they know that as well. And they have paid the consequences for that. Whereas if we look at the same side, you know, with the Democrats, there's an attorney general candidate in Virginia who's running to hold accountability and hold up the law. And he has called for the murder of his opposition, called for the murder of a Republican lawmaker's children, and we don't see that same accountability. You know, these members of this group chat, I'm not going to call them kids.
Sure.
These members of the group chat have had their lives completely changed. They're not going to get hired again. They are facing accountability. Whereas we see a candidate for attorney general who's probably going to win this election, even though they've said things that are way worse.
Yeah, and you know what? You and I have talked a lot about, there's both-sidedness and kind of the equivalency factor of what's good and bad. Bad is bad, good
Absolutely.
is good.
Yeah.
And you have come to that conclusion when you look at these statements. Moving forward in terms of bringing that temperature down, I want to ask you a question. You knew Charlie Kirk. You invited him to come to campus at Michigan State
Absolutely.
University. You understand what healthy debate looks like. All of this that you saw being exchanged, where does that belong in your eyes?
So as a country, we've normalized things that shouldn't be normal. Part of that is rhetoric like this. I've faced scrutiny from my own party for calling this out, but I'm not going to put my party above my country, and I'm not going to lose my morals for my party. I know what is incorrect, and I'm not afraid to call it out for what it is. And that is the standard we should hold with any politician or any activist like myself.
And listen, and I totally agree with you when you hear someone like Jay Jones, a Democratic candidate in Virginia's attorney general race, call for bullets to the head of an opponent. That is abhorrent, disgusting, and absolutely unacceptable. But at the same time, we have to figure out a way to move people forward. How do we do that? How do we bring the temperature down and allow people to know there has to be a common moral standard by which we operate?
By enforcing the common moral standard. That means actions should have consequences. We teach that to children, we should teach it to politicians, I have noticed that, these statements were put out by the Attorney General candidate, but the U.S. Senator for the state of Virginia came out the next day saying they're still going to support Jay Jones for his race. That is disgusting.
Well,
Where
absolutely.
is the consequences for that?
And so as you call out Jay Jones as Democrat for doing that, you would also, I heard you say twice, these are not kids who made these terrible statements, and you believe they should be held to the standards of an adult.
They have, and they have been. They lost their jobs, their lives have changed, and they will continue to pay the consequences for their actions, just like any other Democratic politician or any politician in general should pay actions for their consequences because they're serving the public. They are elected by the public, and they must be held accountable by the public like us.
Krish Mathrani, good to see you. Thanks for joining us here.
So much.
We'll see you tomorrow night on The Pulse. We'll be discussing this a little bit further then, but we always thank you for your time.
Thanks so much.